Grace and peace to you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Thompson Sevimli, and I serve as assistant to the bishop in your synod. I'm sorry that I can't be with you during this time while the synod meets in assembly, but please know that I am thinking of you and praying for you during this time. In my absence, I have worked with a member of Prince of Peace Lutheran Church in Gaithersburg, Maryland, whose name is Zach Bernstein. He's a young adult at that church, to make this video. And I'd like to highlight a few of the things I'm working on. To begin talking about some of the things I'm working on in the synod, I would like to tell you about a couple of congregations in our synod. The first is Bethany Lutheran Church. You may know that Bethany has been in the process of closing its congregation and selling its building for more than a year now. And less than a month ago, Bethany sold its building, and the process of closing and selling Bethany is now complete. When Bethany decided to close, it decided to do so as an act of mission. And it voted that of the sale proceeds, 10% would go to the ELCA church-wide organization, 10% would go to local charities, and 80% would go to new and renewing congregations around our synod. What the people of Bethany realized was that they were doing more for the gospel by giving their congregation away than they were by keeping it. And I am filled with gratitude and admiration for the people of Bethany by their witness to their faith. The second congregation I want to tell you about is Christus Victor Lutheran Church. Christus Victor is a direct recipient of some of the proceeds of Bethany's generosity. And Christus Victor has voted in the last few months to go under synodical administration and to restart its congregation, so that no longer is it Christus Victor, but it is now River of Grace Lutheran Church. In a few minutes, you'll meet Pastor Connie Thompson, the congregation's new pastor, but I want you to know that great things are happening at River of Grace. Young adult ministry has two areas of focus in our synod. The first is something called Project Connect. Project Connect is an initiative of Philadelphia, Gettysburg, and Southern seminaries to encourage 18 to 30-year-olds to think about where God is calling them in life, and in fact whether God may be calling them to serve as rostered leaders in our church. If you are an 18 to 30-year-old who've been thinking about whether God is calling you to rostered ministry, or if you know someone who might be thinking that way, please have them contact Pastor Mark Olson, Pastor Thomas Knaw, Pastor Meredith Keesley, Pastor Ray Ranker, or myself to learn more about Project Connect. We'd be happy to meet with one of these young adults and to get them involved in the work of Project Connect in our synod. The second part of young adult ministry I'd like to tell you about is my work with congregations. Before I tell you about what's happening with congregations in this synod, I'd like to highlight our speaker, Chris Nelson. He's one of the first people that I met with 4 years ago when I started thinking about young adult ministry. And he's a Lutheran pastor in the ELCA who's been doing young adult ministry for years. I hope that you'll find what he has to say challenging but also encouraging, because I know that there are so many people and so many places that want to connect with young adults, and often it's that they don't know how. I think Chris has words of wisdom for us that we can put to good use here. There are some congregations in our synod that have already started putting all of this work into practice. And those congregations I'm going to highlight during the rest of my time include Faith Lutheran Church in Arlington, Virginia, Luther Place Church in Washington, D.C., and the Aroma Evangelical Church in Washington, D.C. These congregations are all three very different congregations, and they have come quite a long way in their work with young adults. But all of them have grown and continue to struggle with what it means to be a congregation focusing on young adult ministry and reaching out to young adults in their community. There are three things I'd like to highlight that seem to be key to all growing young adult ministries. The first key element of all growing young adult ministries is that they have the support of the senior pastor. As you'll see with the congregations we highlight, this doesn't mean that the senior pastor has to do the work. In some congregations, the senior pastor is the person leading the charge on young adult ministry. In other congregations, the senior pastor is simply the person who is highlighting the ministry from the pulpit, in meetings with council and other leadership groups, and with people of all ages in the congregation.
We have a senior pastor that is really concerned and deeply cares about young adults and really looks at integrating us into the entire picture of Luther Place community, and that goes from council all the way through the different levels of leadership. So I think that's a really key component.
But whatever the case, the senior pastor is an absolutely key component of successful young adult ministry in any congregation.
I always go to the door after worship where I see the most people I don't know, and I try to meet people as they're leaving church and kind of connect a name with a face so that when I write them later in the week, we already are beginning to build a relationship, and I'm finding out what they're looking for in a congregation.
The second key component for growing young adult ministries in the Synod is that they all have someone with dedicated staff time. This means that someone from the staff, whether it be the senior pastor or it be another person on staff, ordained or lay, has at least a small amount of time devoted to meeting with young adults and coordinating young adult ministry in the congregation. What this does is ensure that someone is responsible for it, someone is working on it, someone is making sure that it's a priority, and someone is continually attentive to it and accountable for it.
I think that really the ideal world is that you have a person that's really dedicated full-time to young adult ministries, especially as the young adult ministry expanded like it has at Luther Place, where it's really blown up and there's just a ton of young adults.
The third key component for growing young adult ministry is that whomever is responsible for young adult ministry is meeting with young adults one-on-one for coffee or for dinner to learn a little bit about them, and then to invite them back to something that young adults will find welcoming in the congregation.
We do a lot of relational meetings. Me as a staff person and also other leaders within the young adult ministry meet with other young adults as they come through, and also young adults in our world.
I think the social event has been great, but also the coffees like we do here where we talk about significant issues.
Through this process, we're getting to know each other really well and becoming good friends as well.
These are three of the most important things that are happening in growing young adult ministries in our Synod, and I'm elated that we've had so much growth. When I started working on young adult ministry 4 years ago, I estimate that we had about 60 young adults gathering across congregations for monthly events, like fellowship events, or spiritual events, or service events. Now, 4 years later, I estimate that we have at least 180 young adults gathering across our Synod and across congregations at any one time for those kinds of fellowship, service, and spiritual events.
We've lived in 3 different states, 7, 8 different apartments, different places, and this is the first place that we've officially joined since, I don't know, we were confirmed.
One of the things that I've really been excited about is I found that young adults really are looking to connect with each other. They're looking for a place to worship. They're looking for ways to get involved.
We have a lot of, obviously, friends our age, and we tell them about our church, and I think there are a lot of young adult people out here that are looking for a church home, and when they see that there's a church that has a good young adult group and a lot of young adults there, I guess it draws it to them.
But there is still much work to do. And if you'd like to become part of connecting with young adults in your community, I'd like to join you. So please feel free to contact me. Give me a call, send me an email, send me a text, and I'll be happy to come and talk with you about how you can begin connecting with young adults in your community and connecting those young adults with faith. I'm sorry that I was unable to be with you in person, but I look forward to being back together with you again so that we can continue to mutually upbuild one another in the faith and to work for the good of the gospel in our congregations and in our community and in the world. God be with you these days.